Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jaleesa Savage, and I currently serve as Fuzzy Math's head of operations, and I'll be hosting our chat this afternoon. At Fuzzy Math, we believe the best products embrace complexity to drive simplicity. We work side by side with product and design teams to transform enterprise applications into seamless experiences, modernizing legacy systems, elevating UX, and aligning product decisions with real business outcomes and goals. But today, we're bringing that same lens to one of the most pressing questions in product development. How do you harness AI with intention? We know AI is accelerating product design and development, but without the right structure, it can just quickly introduce inconsistency, risk, and noise. So, in this candid LinkedIn Live conversation, we have Fuzzy Math leaders share what they're seeing on the ground, how teams are balancing experimentation with governance, how to integrate AI across the product lifecycle, and how to turn fast moving ideas into thoughtful, human centered products. But before we begin, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Mark.
Thanks, Julissa. Hi, folks. I'm Mark Baldino. I'm one of the two co-founders of Fuzzy Math. I've been in UX for 26 years. I don't know. That sounds way too long. A really long time. Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation because I think my take on AI in digital product design is that it's the most revolutionary change that I've seen, and it's rapidly accelerating. So pretty excited to chat through and hopefully answer some of your questions. And I'll hand it over to Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben Inchek. I'm the other co-founder at Fuzzy Math. I've been doing product design and working on the internet since the late 90s when I was in high school at a startup selling skateboards and other things I liked at the time. I think context is critically important to all product design, and I think AI needs human intervention early and often. I will turn it over to Ellie.
Sorry. Hello, I'm Allie. I'm a senior visual designer here at Fuzzy Math, and I've been in the software industry for about 6 years, which seems pretty low compared to you two. But I see AI as extremely powerful, and it has given me some incredible results, but I do have some genuine concerns that I think we'll get into. So
I'm excited. Okay, thank you all. So let's kick it off with a little icebreaker, if we will. So knowing that AI is definitely the buzzword of the moment, do you think it's overhyped, underhyped, or maybe just right? Are we talking about enough, too much? What are we thinking regarding the AI spiel of the moment?
I'll go first. I think it's rightly hyped, and maybe that's a boring take, but I don't think it's underhyped, and I think it's I think in the right hands with the right people, with the right experimentation, it really can drive transformation in organizations. I've seen it sort of drive transformation in organizations. So I feel like people are always talking about it, but I actually think people are using it a lot. So I think hype is right on the right level.
I'm going to give my first kind of sort of boring answer of the day, where I think it's both. I think there's ways where it's way overhyped and it can't do all the things that it's promised. I think there's ways underhyped of how it's going to transform kind of the world in general. And I think it really depends on what we mean when we're talking about AI, because it could be like a feature or product. It could be this nebulous thing that's just out there. So make sense of that answer if you can, but I kind of think it's yes, no, and maybe in both all at the same time.
Yeah, I would say in its current form, it's overhyped, but the trajectory, perhaps the right level of hype.
Okay, all right. So I guess in thinking about maybe Mark, your answer and seeing how it's transformed, do we think product and design teams are structurally prepared for AI?
So I would say it's organizational dependent. One thing I've noticed in my career is that designers have been quick to adopt new tools and technologies and drive change within organizations, really change makers. And I love that about the user-centered design process and the UX process. I will say, I think there's been some hesitancy, and I'm only speaking from a design, perspective because that's the world I live in, and maybe in other industries it's the same. But I feel like I felt more hesitancy from designers in their adoption of this technology in particular, given fears, concerns. But it's also interesting because I feel like other groups are moving faster than design is. And so I think that's organizational. And I think it's like the design community has been a little bit hesitant. So if I had to scale from like, we're really prepared to we're not prepared, I think it's a little bit more towards we're not prepared. It's not a severe thing. The good thing is things change so quickly that it's quick to catch up to your peers or other organizations.
Yeah. Ben, curious about your thought on what you've also seen in the field as far as just maybe just even skills gap or even just design org readiness as well.
Yeah, I don't have a blanket statement, but I like all product and design teams aren't the same. So I don't is our team structurally ready for it? I don't know. But I do think that the teams that have more of they support a culture of change are going to do way better. And that change is okay and rigid roles aren't going to be as rigid anymore. Kind of like what Mark was just saying. Different people can do different things and they can go really, really fast. Is that good or bad? I don't know. I maybe not. But supporting a culture of change and having structure in place to be able to do that safely is really important. And I think one of the most critical factors moving forward is going to be people with taste are really going to be helpful because anybody can do almost anything, frame that with, I love hyperbole. But if, engineering team is doing a lot more design work or the product management is doing more design work, anybody can do design work. And what's the role of the designer, I think, is maybe to have that design lens or knowing what's tasteful design or what design makes sense for the context we're working in. I think is going to be critically important. I'll probably say the word context 100 more times today because I think that's the thing that's going to really, really, that's what's needed is you need to be able to move quickly and anybody can kind of do some of these things that historically were designers. So the organization or the team needs to be okay with that, but then have this lens of taste and, design quality that somebody needs to be responsible for.
Yeah. Allie, as a visual designer who is all about taste, right? It's all about flair. It's about having the right level of messaging, the right level of pizzazz, right? Branding, all of that is what you think about. How have you been sort of approaching the AI challenge of the moment? How have you been kind of getting ready? What have you been experimenting with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's expanded my abilities. I think that especially in school, which was more of a traditional graphic design background and a somewhat illustrative, somewhat artistic versus, an interface design. I think I have a certain style that is sort of even carried out into interface design. And I think AI has expanded my ability to adopt a different style. I think a recent example is a slide deck for a company that wanted a very vision forward, a little bit futuristic, but in a stylistic way, style for their deck. And those illustrations aren't something I typically do, but AI kind of helped me figure it out. So I think I have a taste that can't be replicated by AI, but I think that combined with AI's sensibilities is pretty powerful.
Yeah, I love that. Going maybe more into some of the challenges, what have we seen that generative AI has just presented, right? So Mark, thinking more on the organizational level, what challenges are you seeing generative AI present? What does it introduce as far as the story that design has to tell now on that level? And how do we kind of ensure that, AI assisted design doesn't amplify bias? We hear a lot of that in the AI field in general. How do we make sure it isn't basically just producing fast, but maybe poorly thought out, design? And how do we tell that story to leads and leaders who need to make those decisions and essentially move those dollars, right?
No, I mean, you just described the core problem. So it's, from my perspective, it's total chaos out there. We've given people who have no design experience, design background, user-centered methodologies, tools to generate UI really, really quickly, which in the one side is like super powerful, right? Used to have, Balsamiq was a tool that business analysts would use 15 years ago, 10 years ago to sketch out their ideas, right? And now they can do a full prototype in Replit or Claude Code. But they're not applying the rigor that I think UX designers apply. So it's really chaotic. There's a lot of tools. There's a lot of things getting presented, and people are going really, really quickly to UI. Now, as UX and visual designers, we know that people love to respond to visuals. So we have people who are developing visuals that they love. They're showing it to other people, and other people love it because it's full color, look and feel, and they can do it really, really quickly. But there isn't a lot of depth of thought. So what I see a lot in our clients is very thin, wide prototypes where they've used 1 or 2 prompts and they're getting these really rich, very generic experiences out of them. And they're not going deep. They're not going 2 or 3 levels deep. And they're not doing that because they don't want to. They just don't have the experience to do that. And so it's up to design to inject itself into that process, either to start or to take over a prototype or a design and kind of dig into the weeds and try to pull that back out. So there's an insane amount of challenges I think designers are facing right now, which is everyone else is doing design's job in a really chaotic fashion. And they're excited about it. And I love that they're excited about it. But now we kind of have to be like the AI cops, which I don't think feels like a very good thing. For anybody in the design community, because all of a sudden we're like the slow down, apply more process here. And I think everyone sort of has maybe a negative visceral reaction to that response from design.
Yeah. Ben, are you seeing a similar challenge, maybe a different challenge with generative AI? What are you seeing in the field?
Yeah, I think probably a plus one to everything Mark said of just the ability, we use a process at Fuzzy Math. It's not unique or our own, and it's not rigid. We actually move pretty quick, but I think AI gives folks the ability to skip process entirely, and that's generally a bad thing. How many times have we shown a wireframe and people are like, it's cool, but it's never like mind blowing. And then you show visuals and they're like, this is amazing, but why is this header here? And we've like, the wireframe, we saw that 15 times and it never really clicked to visuals. Now it's kind of sort of easy to go straight to visuals, but then like the everything else is just kind of like rough or missed or not deep, as Mark is saying. And there's a purpose for the process we use, really understanding the user, understanding the context of use, making sure that from a design system point of view, we're using similar interactions in similar ways across different features or different places within the product. And if you're just kind of like whipping something up offhand, like those things aren't being thought about deeply. I think that's a problem. But I do think it's fantastic that people can take an idea or hear something in research or just wake up at 2 a.m., have this idea in their head, write it down, and then the next morning they can have like a kind of sort of functional thing working to tell a story to somebody else. Say, this was in my brain, and now you can actually click on it is great. And almost anybody can do that. But then to bring it back to the design team to say, all right, this is the vision. How do we get it to fit into our system that actually makes sense and users are going to know that this button does the same thing that it does over there, and that kind of stuff I think is everybody's going really fast in different directions. Somebody has to wrangle it, and I think to Mark's point, sometimes the design team kind of seems like the bad guy because we're the product police in some ways to say, well, we're breaking the rules here. So rules, I don't like rules, nobody likes rules. But I think we need a lot more rules with AI and need to really think things through. But that might be coming after the idea instead of before it these days, and that's a big challenge.
Yeah. Now, Allie, as a visual designer and as someone who has to take the wireframes into that, and all the things you consider from accessibility to contrast to all the words that I learned at UXL, what challenges are you seeing with generative AI, either in your own work or also just like in the wild? Have you seen some super crazy designs that maybe made your head spin? Like what's your perspective and how you're engaging with this sort of new but exciting, space?
Yeah, I'm surprised by the lack of accessibility in non-designers' outputs. Actually, I think accessibility is not as common as I thought before these tools. So it does make sense that the tools aren't prioritizing it unless you ask for it. So that I do feel like an accessibility cop. I do like the term AI cop. Yeah. So a PSA, if you're making design, if you're asking Claude Design to create a prototype, give it the constraint of ADA accessibility and W3C accessibility. I promise it won't make it uglier. It'll make it more sophisticated. So
I love that PSA, especially as these the regulations and accessibility needs keep changing. So to keep that front of mind is definitely something that that we need to do. Ben, I saw you on mute. Did you want to respond to anything Alia said?
I appreciate that. It's not necessarily what Ali said as much as another thought about challenges Gen AI presents is I think it puts us on our toes. We're a little bit more reactive as designers, and it's really, really simple to put something together that visually looks really nice, which is kind of like how Ali's job is to take some like black and white and gray stuff and make it look really nice. But now when anybody can make something look really nice, it's putting us on our heels to really quickly explain why, oh yeah, that looks great, but it doesn't work great. And usually we're leading that conversation and now we're reacting to that. And I think it's a very important skill to be able to explain really quickly of, yeah, that looks really cool, probably because Gen AI ripped something else off that was in its model and it spit it back out at us and it looks really pretty, but for this person doing this task that doesn't actually work. And we've played around with a bunch of these tools and we get some, like, sometimes it's really fun and really funny to kind of like make fun of it, but then other times because it's internal and we can do that and we're all, on the same page and we've been working together for years. But then a client can bring us something and be like, hey, we really like this, and it's kind of our job to say it looks great, however, and then you have to really quickly be able to intelligently explain that interaction pattern doesn't work, or it's not accessible, or all these different reasons that most of Fuzzy Math went to school for this stuff, or has been doing it for at least 3 years or 10 years or 20 whatever years from Mark and I, and we haven't had these conversations in this order before. So now we're completely like it's like flipped how the script goes. I think it's a huge challenge. It's really fun. I think we're really good at it, but it's just something new after doing this for 20 something years of like, wait, oof, all right, that does look great, and here's the 17 different rules it's violating. So what's the most important concept you're trying to get across, and let's think it through and make it a little bit better. And it's just, the process is flipped. The outputs from people are wildly better than they've ever been before. Balsamiq is a really funny example. I think I just saw something, I think that Mark posted, that looked a lot like Balsamiq, and my first reaction was not super positive, to be honest, but I do think it's better than something that's super high polish.
I was just going to say that, Ben. I was playing around with Claude Design, and I think it's actually like a really interesting. I think it's a really interesting UI and metaphor. It's Claude is moving into the world of like Replit and these rapid prototypes. So I tried the wireframe mode, and my hope was that it was a really nicely refined black and white, one color, what we consider a wireframe, and instead it did this really like pencil sketchy version, which is, I think, can be really good to get an idea across. But if we bring that to a client and the client's brought a full color look and feel, they've thrown their brand guidelines in there, like, we're going to lose that battle. And we've always been fighting the battle to slow down and take incremental steps to get to a final look and feel, commercial grade, enterprise ready tool. And now people are skipping a bunch of steps and we're having to like pull them back. And I feel like it's just an interesting application of, or it's a really interesting time for designers to have to step back and figure out what's the right tool and the right output at the right time. And as you said, Ben, we're kind of doing it in a reverse order these days. And that's an added challenge when we've already been, we're already challenged in our, in getting folks to adhere to what we think is kind of the ideal process or the right way to do digital product design.
Yeah, I guess I wonder, and this is a complete hypothesis, how does one win that battle? Is it in user research and having a really strong user research foundation in the beginning? Is it now more in validation research and getting it in front of users and being able to test? Like, how does the process more or less respond to now this new ask, right? And I'm totally just going off script and putting y'all on the spot. So
No, this is it. This is what designers have to figure out. I mean, part of this is you have to play with these tools. You have to use these tools, and you have to figure out the right way to do it. So everyone, I think, who's not a designer is going right to one solution and presenting that. So you have to find ways to demonstrate that Gen AI can be used for its generative capabilities, right? One of the things it's very good at is actually going wide early on from a conceptual perspective. But you have to make that case, and you have to show people like, oh, instead of going right to a clickable 40-page interactive prototype, we should actually do some level of interaction modeling and concepting based on theme and come up with a bunch of high-level ideas. So you just have to figure out ways to use the tool earlier in the process that demonstrate value to those people around me. So that's my push is like, find a kink in the process and apply AI there, and use our early phase deliverables that we love so much that have taken a really long time to do. Use it for competitive and comparative analysis, for heuristic reviews, for concept generation, and show that, and do that before people get to their Gen AI prototype. But I'm curious, Allie and Ben, if you all have any additional thoughts.
I have a thought about like the end process, because that's where I land usually. I think, well, one thing with the earlier question that I think these designs struggle with is a scalability. And visual design has components, and then they have patterns, and then there are visual page patterns that sort of need to work for a variety of instances. And then there's a whole other can of worms with a marketing site versus a product, and if those two are married together. So I think, but to answer this question, I think taking what someone gives you as the final output with the visuals and making it your collaborator. I think we at Fuzzy Math always make our clients our collaborators, and now they have more tools to do that. And I don't know if that's always a bad thing, or it doesn't have to be a bad thing, I guess. Like, so if they give us some sort of output, say like, okay, here's what we would change to make this more scalable. Here's what we would change to make this more of a template that can apply to a few different pages, and go from there.
Yeah.
I think my approach to it in like a friendly, joking way is to put on my like UX snob hat and try to bring out some big words to explain what I'm seeing and what the issues I see with it are. Like an example, well, I guess two quick examples. One is on a lot of sales calls these days, one of the phrases I hear over and over again is, I put this together with AI and it's not quite right. Can you help me? And it's like, yeah, like that's interesting. They've hit that point on their own to say, I have this idea, and the idea is there. I got it pretty far by myself or as a team, but all the pieces aren't clicking. And those conversations are generally pretty easy to say, cool, all right, what do you think is wrong with it? And like, we can kind of help you forward. Another one is, an existing client brings us something and says, this is what we have, and we really like it. Then we are really quickly trying to figure out how to explain to them that we see issues with it. And it's not just to say, your idea is bad and we need to fix it, as much as here's some issues that we're kind of seeing and how can we approach this together. It involves, do we know the user goals? Did we have a chance to understand users? Are we consuming their research? Do we know the context of use at all? And then trying to raise questions around that to say, well, it kind of seems like this is the goal, or there's competing issues here, or just, obviously this was kind of duct taped together with 3 different ideas over the course of 6 years. And now we have 9 primary buttons on the screen, or things that look like primary buttons. And it's just that level of taste or craft that's not quite there, that I think they don't know that's the issue. They just don't know. They know people aren't using it as much as they want, but they don't know the why. As quickly as we can get to, here's some ideas of why we think this isn't working, to gain some trust. And then we can still move really fast, but to really try to ground it in some like core principles of, primary buttons. You should get one of them. One big blue thing on a page so you know how to move forward. And then they might have an aha moment of like, oh, these people know what they're talking about. Cool. That's interesting. How can we move forward? And then we get back into our process. But it is a huge challenge. It's really fun. It's also pretty stressful.
Yeah, totally. I think all of you have alluded to experimenting a little bit with generative AI, and I guess I'm curious to know, was anyone surprised by anything? Were folks generally impressed? Anyone concerned by the output of what they did, or and also too, like what sort of did we learn and how do we approach generative AI, right? What is it maybe even about some of the prompting? What is it about? I know Alice, you mentioned making sure accessibility is at the forefront and how we prompt and use, Claude. I guess what have we learned in our own experimentation, at least thus far? Because again, the landscape changes day by day. So what you may have learned last week might be completely different in a month, but that's totally okay. How have folks been playing with the generative AI as of late?
I feel like I've played around with it quite a bit since the beginning. And so definitely Claude, definitely ChatGPT. And also, I'm pretty weirdly loyal to Midjourney, even though it's been really giving me trouble in in a professional context. I am impressed by. I feel like when I approach it in a more playful and experimental way, I get the best results, which is a hard spirit to cultivate when you're under a deadline, or your clients are have pressure to use AI. But I'm impressed by its ability to take a single image and really run with it. I think the best results have come from giving it an example, and running with it and building entire worlds around it. I'm impressed by its speed for sure. Even though I know that's the main the main appeal, I'm still impressed by it. And then I'm surprised, I kind of alluded to this, but surprised by its inability to think in a system, and surprised by its inconsistency with you give it the same prompt and it comes out with something completely different. And I wonder how that's going to change in the future.
Yeah, totally. Any other folks experimenting on the call? Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly because my clients are spending the majority of their time using these tools in product design and in engineering. I find half of my day I'm probably in various Gen AI tools, and Claude is definitely the one I'm using the most. And felt like it was the most complete package, from doing just simple query and response to setting up projects and some agentic loops and doing code and then Claude design. I'm really, I mean, I guess to Allie's point, like garbage in, garbage out, good content. I'll steal Ben's comment as well. Like give it context and you're going to, good context, you're going to get something good out. So I have a number of like ongoing projects with Claude that run locally, that have a repository of information. And I have used on one project in particular, I've done everything from give me some initial concepting ideas to help me put a deck together, to build a lightweight prototype, to do simple process flows, kind of a journey map, do a click through. And I keep giving it more context, and it seems to learn as it's going and give me better answers. And it is a true kind of collaborator on this. Now, my general rule is like you need to start and end with humans when you're using Gen AI. So I tell people, like, if you have a 5-step process, 1, 3, 5 should be human, and 2 and 4 can be AI. You need to do a lot of generative loops and continually go through things. A simple prompt and response is probably not going to get you what you need. And so you really have to kind of learn how to prompt. And we've done a bunch of like starter kits for clients to try to get them to use a design system more consistently, to adhere to accessibility standards, to help identify who the personas are. Like when we're designing as designers, we have this context of who the humans we're designing for. Maybe, we've done some research. Like we need to give that to these tools, because the more specific you are, the better the output is. And if not, they're going to give you something very general based on, like, I don't know, a SaaS application, like a CRM SaaS application. And so you really need to explain who the users are and the use cases. And I just think when you build up that context, you can actually get something really, really rich. So I find that really promising. And I don't know if I'm disappointed in the fact that sometimes you get very generic output if you don't give it enough context. So it's less a fear or disappointment. It's just sort of like kind of is what it is. And people need to recognize that the first thing they get out of these tools, you probably need to do 15 loops maybe to get something accurate. You need to give it enough context to really drive value in the process.
Yeah, my use, I don't get a goof around with it too often, but my use is generally like, give me some places to explore, and then I'll go do some exploration on my own. So this is the problem I'm dealing with. What are a couple different approaches I could use? What's a good way to frame this problem into like 3 slides in the deck? And then it's, I take it, I move it around on my own and I play with it. But I think it's really interesting of, here's 3 different approaches. I think I was reading something on Reddit about the different deck styles of the big consultancies, and they all have their own house style. So like, put this in the BCG style, what would it look like? And I think that's really helpful, but it is kind of like, I think it's, if I'm interpreting it correctly, I think it's Mark's approach of, human AI, it's always back and forth with me. I think it's rude to take something and send it to somebody else. Actually, there's ethical issues I have with that, of no human editing or no human manipulation. And so it is give me a head start, which it can do really fast. Although at certain times, through some of the experimentation on a project, the UI it spit out, we didn't love, and I think I would still use Google image search for that. I would put in the pattern I'm looking for, and I'm the lens. I'll go and look at 80 images super fast. And I can be the one to decide this matches the context. This has the right similar data that I'm looking for, and I don't have to go back and forth and create the context with the AI as much as I have enough experience. I feel like I can just go to Google Images and put it in and really, really quickly see ooh, these 3 match what I'm looking for, grab a screenshot, and I'm off to the races of my sketch. But storytelling is really helpful. Editing, telling it, don't just say nice things to me, be honest. Don't try to pump me up and get me to engage with you more. I think reading about those stories are hilarious and dark all at the same time. But yeah, just give me a place to look into, and I'll go look into it a little bit more, and then I'll come back at the end for some fine tuning. It's really how I'm using exploration and kind of double diamond on a personal level.
Yeah, it sounds like there's something about an art of prompting, right? There's an art of putting in the right words, context, telling it the right direction, but then also really being able to assess its output in a way that is kind of careful. So it almost sounds like in some way you have to trust the machine and kind of not trust it. You trust it to get you there, but then you also have to be properly skeptical of it to do the fine line, sort of read through the fine line optimization. I think all 3 of you are kind of referencing in a certain kind of way. So it's a really interesting balance of how you both have to trust and be slightly distrustful of the output at the same time. That's a really interesting dynamic. So I guess in thinking about the cycle of that, could sort of an over-reliance on AI to prop up legacy tools and systems, could it backfire? And there's a lot right now in the zeitgeist around whether we integrating AI into everything. How do we integrate it? Is it time to just kind of rip and replace everything? Do we just kind of start from scratch? I guess I wonder who bears the true risk of that, and what are we sort of seeing in the market and in the industry?
I mean, it is organization dependent. I'm seeing some enterprise software companies that are pushing really, really fast, and that's both integration of AI into their internal processes and into their tools. Obviously, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of agents have been released in the past year into tools, and I think the utility of those has not been measured appropriately, or when measured appropriately has found that many of those agents are actually not delivering value. So I think those folks that are taking a cautious approach, for a while, it was just figuring out the technology and doing a lot on their own. And now there's obviously the third-party tools have moved so far forward that people are integrating those into kind of the background. So you might not know when you go to your CRM software provider that they've actually connected to Anthropic, and they're using that as their engine, and they have a layer on top of it. But I think those are the bets most people are making now, which is to glom onto one of the bigger third-party providers, integrate it into their tool, and derive value from it. But who bears the brunt many times is the end users at the end of the day. AI is still, a hammer running around looking for a nail in many cases. And I think a lot of early lessons were that nail was not that helpful, right? Putting a chatbot in that actually slows people down in terms of how quickly they can find information or gives poor answers is a real challenge. Or product and design teams being really excited about, hey, let's AIify this. Let's add an AI answer. Let's change a value predictively based on AI, are realizing that when you get to the technology components and engineering, it takes a really long time and is really hard to do that. And sometimes the quality output just isn't there. So I think that's why it's sort of chaos out there. We're learning a bunch of these lessons as we're going. And I don't think there's any advantage to being first or last mover here. At least from an enterprise software perspective, it is being, I think, methodical about it, but also pushing and finding those values. So the best thing about the user-centered design process, it is mapping an end-to-end process, understanding the humans, their pain points, and their goals. You can find those points where you have a big problem and maybe have struggled from a competitive advantage to deliver in the enterprise space. And you could just nail one of those with AI and devote a lot of time and energy to it, do some technical proof of concepts. You can get a quick mock-up in a prototype and then validate that both from is this giving real answers based on real data, and put it in front of humans and get their feedback and just place a few bets. To loop back to part of your question, I think rip and replace is not what a lot of enterprise companies are doing or should be doing, but they should be finding some very clear, specific ways that they can integrate AI or build an agent that's going to do a manual process over and over again, still keep human in the loop and do more experimentation with it. I think there's too much risk for big companies to move too fast, but if they move too slow, listen, we did this for, in your space, Julissa, we have a time tracking tool. I gave 3 prompts to Claude and got a very generic time tracking tool out of it that we could launch internally at Fuzzy Math as a SaaS application that no one else uses, right? Probably it's not commercial grade, but we could use it. So there are, competitors out there who are going to start launching Gen AI tools out into the marketplace of low quality, and they're going to come and steal margin from some players. So there is certainly a balance between going fast and being methodical about it. But that's kind of what I feel like I'm seeing for our clients in the enterprise space.
For sure. Any other thoughts, Ben?
If I don't know, the AI hallucinated is an acceptable answer, I think everybody should move super fast. If that's not an acceptable answer, and it absolutely should not be, I 100% agree with Mark of maybe a little bit more methodical. Maybe you get a North Star vision. Maybe you validate that, and it doesn't have to take months and months and months, but what are we trying to do here? And let's make sure it's right. And I would give that answer 10 years ago, and probably 20 years ago. And I'd give it 10 years from now too, of what are we trying to do and is it going to work? And let's figure that out before we commit time and effort to code and production. And something that doesn't work is bad and you shouldn't do it. And you should probably validate it and vet it before you do it. But I think we could do it really, really fast these days. And I think that's, the core essence of the human-centered design process. Let's not lose that. But I think taking some bets, getting some alignment on what are we trying to do here, what's the vision, and then do customers want it? Will they pay for it? Is this going to ruin anything? Is it going to break anything? Probably should still know all that stuff. Those aren't really going away with AI.
Totally. So what parts of the design process do we think will still require humans in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years, right? So if AI is handling production and we know that they can do it maybe haphazardly, right? We know it needs some intervention. We know it needs some finessing. What becomes the new definition of design expertise? What is the role of the designer truly in the room? And I think we've alluded to it just a little bit, but just sort of tying that bow all together, because I do think the definition, in some ways, I think is maybe still the same, but I think it is morphing in some very interesting ways too. I'm curious to know what you all think.
I think that there should always be an expert in the room in case something goes wrong, because I think something always goes wrong. Personal example, I've learned coding on my own before vibe coding, and the vibe coding is really fun. but I know how complicated, or at least it feels complicated to me, how like JavaScript works. And so I've asked ChatGPT to teach me what it did and why. So yeah, I don't see the collaboration ever going away. I don't see the back and forth ever going away. Maybe less touch points with each other. And then I also think that the ability to make connections outside of the given genre is a very human trait that I don't see AI replacing. One example, we had a senior designer here who was a mentor to me when I was an intern. The joke was that she would be like walking down the street and see a leaf and apply that to her designs, which is like, like that kind of lateral thinking is very human and very hard to replace, but who knows?
Yeah, I don't see humans going anywhere. Like whatever humans are involved in the design process today, I think are going to stick around and just in different ways. I still think it's anyone that understands how to apply context to a design and how to really, really understand people and their goals and the challenges that they present and think in systems. And that this button does the same thing here as it does over there. And it could be an engineer, it could be product manager, it could be a designer, whatever the title is. The people, I think that's what we do. We tell stories, we set up some context so people can get out of their shoes and get into somebody else's shoes and say, this is the person, they're doing this thing, and this is their goal, and here's a screen or three to support that. I don't know if I care what the name or the title or that job is, but that's not going anywhere anytime soon, and maybe it just moves faster. But even, some of the designers that have been through Fuzzy Math stores or are currently here, I think there's one in particular that's become like a full stack, like experience designer, and like they code stuff, but at the core of what they do is really understanding context and people and goals, and understanding that the business goal and the user goal, there's some overlap there that they need to get really, really right. And I think that's the core of what we do. And I don't think that's gone anywhere. And humans are still going to be involved in some way.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like the hardest parts of our job aren't the tools or technology. It's the humans we deal with, clients. It's one another. So people who can communicate clearly are going to be part of the design process. So putting on the design consultant hat, I think that's a role of design now and into the future. We had a client. I was having an honest conversation about AI with him, and he was a CTO, fairly large enterprise organization, and very tech forward. And I was just saying, there's a lot of fear in, I think, in the daily workers, individual contributors' lives around the role of AI. And yeah, there's probably some quote unquote efficiency gains that organizations are saying that they have, or cuts they're making for AI because AI is replacing, jobs. But his point to me was, my expectation is that you're using AI in the process. I think you'd be doing us a disservice if you weren't using AI, because there are efficiency gains. And if you're doing everything manually, it's going to be really, really slow. This was post a presentation we had done. But what he said to me was, we just did that presentation. I assumed you used AI. I'd be disappointed if you didn't to generate that, but I'm not paying you for that. You then explained the designs to me. You gave me context around those designs. You explained my visceral reaction to those designs. You told me what I was feeling and why I was feeling it. And then you gave me my recommendation. And I trust you enough to support that recommendation. So it really was, AI is part of the process, but how we communicate about our designs, how we explain them, as Ben said, the context to them. And then our expert opinion, which, has been sort of described as, kind of how we can describe design, other folks can't. I think that description and communication of words is something AI is not going to replace. And that those ongoing conversations, those live synchronous conversations, I think are where design and design consultants can play sort of a key role moving forward.
Yeah, totally. Well, before we wrap, I wanted to open up for Q&A, and it looks like we actually have a question coming in. Oh, I like this question. It actually asks you to maybe take off your professional hat a little bit. So the question we got from Will is, how do regular, in quotes, people interact with AI in their daily personal lives outside of the professional context? Do people want or need AI assistance or to engage with AI media and entertainment? And I'm actually curious, do any of you all personally engage with any AI media and entertainment? Do you all have an artist that's technically an AI artist? I'm just curious now, taking off the professional hat.
I'm gonna answer. So thanks, Will. I know Will. We've known Will for years at Fuzzy Math, so appreciate the question. I don't do any AI stuff on the media entertainment. I do pulse people regularly in my lives around the use of AI, because I feel like in technology, I'm a bit of an early adopter on items. So I'm always asking how people are using these tools, like my family members. I was at a doctor's appointment with my mom, and I was asking the doctor a bunch of questions. And then afterwards, she was like, you should have been a doctor. And I'm like, what? She's like, your questions were so good for that doctor. You should have been a doctor, Mark. And I didn't tell her this, but the truth was, I have a thread of her around her healthcare, and it's sanitized. So it's not all about, no PII in there, but it gives me questions for the doctors, and they're really good to step outside of my expertise and sort of ask intelligent questions and guide conversations around. I think people needing AI assistance and agentic in their personal lives, like I suggested something to my partner, Kate, around scheduling and organization. And she was like, whoa, no. So I was like, I think we could throw this all in the cloud. We could have a dashboard in the kitchen and we'd have all these tasks. And she was like, no, that's way too far. So I think like the agentic world in the personal life is like a few years. And I think you're going to need to get commercial grade products that just work for people, and they won't know that there's an agent behind them. I think everyone's kind of still stuck in the chat world of ask questions and response, really using it as a cleaned up version of Google. So that's my take.
I think it's funny that you mentioned the medical field, because my brother recently became a doctor, and he's really sick of me texting him about medical questions. So I have asked Claude some questions. And then if he's like, you need help, then I go to my
I thought you were going to say that he's annoyed that people are coming into these sessions with their phone and their 16 ChatGPT questions. So he's bothered by his family members asking.
He's tired of me texting him for like, what's this bruise? I'm also, I guess, a hypochondriac. So he's like, go away. But Claude never sends me away.
It's very funny, and as a sibling, a younger sibling, I wouldn't stop. I would probably double the outreach. I go to my girls' soccer games on the weekends, and it's impossible not to hear what other parents are talking about. And there's this one parent that was talking about how they're using AI to schedule like play dates, which is not a super fun task. And I was interested, but it involved a lot of steps and getting everybody's calendars synced up and all this stuff. And then it was like creating all these play dates, and I was not totally into it. And then I don't use it personally in my personal life, except every once in a while I'll have it rewrite like an email to my friends in like the voice of Larry David or the Ultimate Warrior or something, and I think it's hilarious. But outside of that, pretty much nothing. I remember reading a story months ago of like somebody that probably was, had some vested interest in an AI company, saying you could add your credit card info to an agent, you could give it your information about your kid, and you could say, they're celebrating their 8th birthday, our budget's $500, what could we do on their birthday? And it could go out and it could, find a bunch of activities, and it could book it all for you, make sure the timing works. And that like makes my skin crawl of like, just be a better parent, like do it yourself. And if I did that for my kids and they found out in their 20s that I used like a machine to plan their birthdays, I hope they would be very upset with me and be like, oh, that really ruins it for me. I'm disappointed you did that, Dad. But there's like, I think it kind of goes back to that first question. Underwhelming or overwhelming, like is it underhyped or overhyped? I think at the moment that stuff is like makes me grimace. But if you ask me again in 5 years, I bet I have a pretty different answer just because it's changing so much. And instead of it solving every problem the world's ever faced and making being a parent and an adult and a white collar worker better, I think it's going to find some really niche areas where everybody's like, oh, all right, we're not solving this huge problem, but it does this one really, really small thing really well that's super annoying. And I can get behind that. I just don't know. I don't have those yet, but I do think it's going to get there at some point.
Yeah, it's funny. As I read that question and I heard Mark, your response, immediately my husband came to mind, because when we were thinking about a chore list and adapting to his new work schedule, he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll just throw something in the clock, and then it'll send us reminders to our Gmail." And my first instinct was an eye roll, just because he's also a bit of an early adapter type, and he's always telling me about secret servers and all kinds of stuff that I probably should care more about. Y'all, I'm in operations. I work in project management. It's not my industry or my gospel, right? But as I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? If that's a tool that would sort of help make things a little more efficient, or make things a little, like, maybe I won't be so mad about that. If that it takes away some of the executive functioning and fills in the gaps that we know we sort of have, maybe I'm not so mad. How have I used it in my personal life? I'm not gonna lie. My grandmother recently decided she was going back to work. So I said, hey, grandma, we got to get you a resume, because she wants to be a bus driver and I'm not putting in all of her credentials. The way ChatGPT whooped her up an amazing little resume to be 79 years old, she's turning 80 in a couple months. Like, for me to have to not think about that and remember the dates and input that, I will say I applauded ChatGPT that day. So I don't know. I think there is a thing where in the personal life, there's a level of slow adoption, right? Like, because I definitely remember too, even folks being upset about, oh my goodness, Spotify. When Spotify changed its like end of the year wrap up or whatever and made it more of an AI created thing, a lot of folks were up in arms, and I don't think really Spotify's been forgiven yet. There's a lot of that energy of like this kind of natural skepticism that I think folks are having, but in the corporate world, it does feel a little different of what the challenge may be to how folks maybe are personally adapting it. Like, to me, even a smart refrigerator is too far. Like, I don't need to knock on it and it shows me what's inside. I don't know. Like, that's a little too much for me. But that's me personally. Wanted to thank you all for joining us today. Were there any other questions? I'm gonna give a little moment for the chat if anyone wants to pop anything in.
I'm looking. I'm not seeing any popping up.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, y'all, happy to wrap it up. So thank you all. Thank you, Allie. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Mark, for joining us today. I'd also like to thank you all for sharing some time and some space with us, watching us on LinkedIn. Overall, the teams that get AI right aren't necessarily the ones moving fastest, but they're the ones moving with intention. And at Fuzzy Math, we partner closely with product and design teams to bring structure, strategy, and human insight to that work. So whether you're modernizing a legacy system, rethinking your product experience, dreaming something new, or just trying to figure out where AI actually fits, we'd love to help you. Feel free to send us a note at hello@fuzzymath.com to book an intro call. And if you liked our event today, be sure to follow us and Fuzzy Math on LinkedIn. So have a great day, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Have a lovely, lovely, lovely Tuesday.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.